or NATO. It's been in the news a lot lately. First, that was because of the invasion of Ukraine, and now it is that and the fact that the nations of Finland and Sweden are themselves on the cusp of joining NATO. A true nightmare scenario for nearby Russia. And if you've seen any of my content before, but especially this video, you'll know that there are a few things that I hate as much as watching thousands of people blindly taking the word of somebody with no real experience or credibility on a life and death subject like war. But unfortunately, that's exactly what happens every single day online, but especially on Twitch, here on YouTube, and on Twitter as well, where hundreds of thousands of people are being badly misinformed on a whole range of topics. But nowhere has this been more striking, at least for me lately, as with the subject of NATO. So I got to thinking that I would love to make a video to help clear up some of the worst misinformation about NATO. But then I thought about it a little bit more, and I realized that while I studied politics and public administration in college, that wasn't enough. If I'm gonna make this kind of a video, I need to bring in a real expert. So I reached out to a fellow YouTuber who I've been watching ever since the start of the invasion of Ukraine, a badass by the name of Ryan McBeth.
Now, I might be a software engineer, but I spent 20 years as a heavy weapons and anti-tank infantryman.
I sent a DM to Ryan, let him know what kind of video I wanted to make, and then asked if he would answer some questions for me. And without any hesitation, the legend said yes. And so, while I aim to emulate one of my greatest heroes of all time, Adam Savage from Mythbusters, I sent my questions over to Ryan in hopes that together, he and I could bust some of the biggest myths and misconceptions about NATO. So without further ado, let's get into it. Question number 1. Is NATO good or bad?
Well, it has its pros and cons. The pro is that NATO is mostly peaceful, and it's kept Soviet and later Russian aggression at bay for almost 70 years. If you're a member of NATO, an attack on one is considered an attack on all. This is called Article 5. It's been used only once, and that was on 9/11. In the days after 9/11, early warning radar aircraft from 13 different European NATO countries provided overhead cover for the United States. They did 360 sorties, or missions, to help keep America's airspace safe. The bad part? Some people say that NATO is becoming an existential threat to Russia as more and more countries join. There's also a financial cost as well. NATO countries are supposed to spend 2% of their budgets on defense. This is a standard that only a few countries like the UK, Estonia, Poland, Latvia, Bulgaria, and Greece have actually met.
Question number 2. Is NATO sticking to their mission?
NATO's original mission was to counter Soviet and Eastern Bloc aggression. With the fall of communism, some people argued that you really didn't need NATO anymore, but do you give up your car insurance just because you haven't had an accident? NATO's mission changed. It was especially useful during the wars in the former Yugoslavia and during Afghanistan. NATO was also used in Libya to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi.
Question number 3. Is NATO perfect?
Well, it's not perfect, but it's still useful, mainly because NATO creates standards for interoperability of equipment. This greatly simplifies logistics. As we've seen in Ukraine, Russia is having a heck of a time with logistics. Many NATO systems are universal. An American soldier can hand a British soldier ammunition, and it is guaranteed to work in their weapon. An Italian jet can drop an American JDAM bomb. This really simplifies getting the right supplies to the front line.
Question number 4. What are the top misconceptions about NATO?
Probably the top misconception is that NATO forces other countries to join. This is false because every country has a right to decide what treaties it enters into. And joining NATO isn't cheap. Remember, it requires standardizing your equipment. When Poland joined NATO, they had to get rid of all their rifles and make a new rifle that fired NATO-compatible ammunition.
Question number 5. Is NATO on a mission to expand?
Not really. Remember that every country that joins NATO does so on their own dime. Popular opinion says that Russia started this war because they were afraid of Ukraine joining NATO and nuclear weapons being stationed in Ukraine. But nuclear weapons are already in the Barents Sea, and it doesn't matter whether they're 15 minutes away in the Barents Sea or 15 minutes away in Ukraine. It really doesn't change the nuclear response time.
Question number 5. Can a country be forced to join NATO?
No. In fact, France left NATO in the 1960s because they didn't want American nuclear weapons on French soil. Although France rejoined completely again in 2009. A lot of countries choose to join NATO because America spends 10% of their budget on defense. It's like having a big brother who can look out for you.
Question number 6. What is the purpose of these NATO bases I keep hearing about?
NATO doesn't really have bases as much as they have pre-positioned stocks of equipment. NATO has this pre-positioned equipment at multiple bases in Europe, and the equipment is maintained by military and civilian personnel. In the event of a conflict, the soldiers just fly in and fall in on their equipment and literally drive it off the lot ready for combat. NATO soldiers will also train at different countries' bases, especially if that host nation has a certain kind of base that gives a sort of training advantage. British infantry units train with American units in California, and it's common to see Spanish jet fighters at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada.
Question number 7. If Ukraine had been a member of NATO, would Russia have even invaded?
Probably not. Remember Article 5, an attack on one is considered an attack on all. If Russia invades a NATO country, everyone from Spain to Estonia is obligated to respond.
Question number 8. Is Eastern expansion of NATO tantamount to aggression?
I don't think so. President Putin and his army knows NATO's capability. They know that a nuclear weapon in Ukraine is no different than a nuclear weapon in the Barents Sea. But I think his big fear is Ukrainian democracy. Look, Ukraine isn't perfect, but ever since 2014, they've kind of tried this democracy thing. And they're starting to get it. Look, it's been 246 years and America is still trying to get democracy right. If you look at Russia and Ukraine, they have a very close relationship. It's very common for people in Russia to have relatives in Ukraine. So I think the idea of NATO expansion is really just an excuse. I think what really scares Russia is the idea of a Slavic people directly below them who have a higher standard of living because they're democratic and Western leaning. And if the Russian people ever found out that their standard of living was being kept artificially low for the benefit of the oligarchs, well, that's how revolutions happen.
Finally, question number 9. How can somebody get unbiased information about international policy and warfare?
You can start with 2 sources, the Wall Street Journal and The Economist. The other place to look is the Military Times, the Army Times, the Navy Times, the Air Force Times, and the Marine Corps Times. These publications are mainly geared towards soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, although anybody can read them. And it's a good way of developing understanding of what's going on in the military, new policies, and new types of equipment.
That's all for now. Thank you for watching. I hope you have learned something today. If you have, please leave that in the comments below. Let me know if there was something that might have been new to you or that you just found kind of interesting. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe, like this one, share it, and leave a comment. Thank you very much. Old Man Londre, out.
I love the young people.